Welcome to Good Grief, the podcast where resilience meets reality. I'm your host, Dr. Christine Malone. In this podcast, we delve deep into the stories of individuals who've triumphed over tragedy, adversity, and trauma. In every episode, we bring you raw and honest narratives from guests who faced life's most challenging moments head on. Through candid conversations, they share their journeys of resilience, shedding light on the strategies, mindset shifts, and support systems that empowered them to rise above their darkest hours. Join us as we explore the profound depths of human resilience and discover how, even in the face of life's toughest trials, there can be light, growth, and yes, good grief. Okay, listeners, thank you so much for joining me today. My guest is going to tell us a story about his childhood and the book he's written. So his name is Keeper Catran-Whitney. So Keeper, if you would, go ahead and introduce yourself and just tell the guests a little bit, the listeners a little bit about yourself.
Christine, first of all, thank you for having me on your Good Grief podcast. I love the name. I immediately go to Charlie Brown, of course, right? Good Grief. I talk about memories. So thanks for having me. As you so rightfully so said, I am the author. I am the author of the book Helplessness, the emotional health challenges brothers experience once we learn our sisters have been sexually abused by our parents. And I'm going to come to a full stop right there because this needs to be said. This particular topic could be very sensitive for a number of people. It could be triggering for a number of people. By all means, I'm sure Christine will completely agree. Protect yourself at all times, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. Do what you have to do. The podcast will be here for you to come back and listen.
Yep.
But if you find that you're starting to have some things develop, please back away.
Step back.
So with that said, by all means, step back. So with that said, how I came about writing the book was through my family's experience of child sexual abuse in our home. We had a very dark secret, and it was a secret that had been going on for at least 6 years, and my brothers had absolutely no idea what was going on. I come from a family of 10. My mother, my stepfather, 4 boys, 4 girls. I'm the second oldest of the 8. The 2 youngest are twin girls, and through my family's story and with the book, it's from a brother's perspective. What we feel, the trauma, stuff that we deal with, not being able to be part of the conversation, how we travel that journey. And so that's what I talk about. And I usually just start out, have you ever given any thought to what brothers go through once we learn about what happens? Don't worry, you're not alone. Very few, if anyone, ever thinks about a brother. No one ever asks if we're okay. Do we need to talk? Is there anything we need? And so with that said, Christine, you can tell me where you want me to go.
Yeah, no, that's actually, you brought up a lot of points I definitely want to get to. First thing I want to ask you is, did your sisters have an issue with, you saying, how am I doing or whatever? Did they feel like you had no right to do that? Or was it just kind of perception from other people?
I think probably the best way to answer that is to give you some context on how we learned about it. In 1977, my family, we were very popular singers in Los Angeles. That year, we were with United Artists Records. We made Billboard's Top 100 not once, not twice, but 3 times. Concerts, magazines, TV shows, you name it, articles, you name it. 77 was also the year Motown Records completed their exhaustive 3-year search to replace Michael Jackson and the Jackson 5, who they had lost 3 years earlier to Epic Records, and the family that they settled on.
Yeah.
My family. I mean, we had already been singing 6 years, and my family at this time, we were very popular. As I said, we are the Whitney family. So the week that we are going to sign this contract with Motown, which is the largest new artist contract they offered any group, larger than the Supremes, larger than the Four Tops, larger than the Temptations, even larger than the Jackson 5. We're going to sign this contract on a Thursday or Friday. This we know. We just don't know which of the day. The president He's going to give us the call in a couple of days. My sister screams upstairs, boys, come downstairs, family meeting. This is on a Saturday. We all come running downstairs. As we enter the living room, as I do, my three youngest sisters are sitting at the far end of the couch. Christine, they are not saying a word, which is really odd because all they did was talk and laugh and joke and blah, blah. That's all they ever did. My two youngest brothers are sitting at the other end of the couch and they're looking at my sisters and wondering what's going on. And I don't have a clue. I don't know what's going on. Why aren't they happy? Why aren't they, we're about to become rich because I went to 11 grade schools before I graduated high school. I lived in 21 different places. I was homeless 3 times. We talk about abject poverty. That was our life. And here we are on the cusp
About to make a
of
big.
greatness. Finally get out of this life. Why aren't they excited? As I enter the living room, my oldest sister's pacing back and forth in front of the archway leading into the living room, and she's pissed. Okay, not a big deal. She's always upset, maybe with my mom, because she and my sisters were arguing with my mom that morning, going in and out of bedrooms, slamming doors, and you hear raised voices. Okay, the girls and mom are doing something. I don't know, but okay. But I enter and she's still mad. And she's pacing back and forth in front of the entry into the living room. Huh. My oldest brother is standing behind my sisters at the far end of the couch, and I look at him, and our expression to each other is, what the hell? This is supposed to be a joyous occasion. But, I go and I sit down on the couch between my 3 youngest sisters and my 2 youngest brothers, and I wait. Within seconds, my mother and stepfather enter the living room. My stepfather, who's 6'6", 250 pounds, wears a large afro wig, sits on the brown recliner in the middle of the living room, and immediately bends over and puts his face in his hands and covers his face. I'm thinking, is he sick? Something is really off here. My mother, who's very bubbly like her 8 children, walks and stands in front of the large plate glass window overlooking the outside, and she spins around and her face is stoic. There's no expression. There's no emotion. There's no feeling whatsoever. What's about to happen? There are earthquakes. In California, here where I live, and Christy, you're in Seattle, and so you know how we, West Coast, we're going to have them.
It's
Those
coming.
those are material in nature. Freeways break, trees uprooted, blah, blah, blah. You put those back together, rebar, nail, stick, hammer, gum, spit, back together, get back on the road, walk back in the house. But emotional earthquakes, completely different matter.
Yeah.
My 3 brothers and I are about to hear the words no brother ever expects to hear, the words no brother could ever prepare for. My mother finally speaks. Earthquake number 1. Your stepfather has been molesting your sisters for years. What did you say? I start dropping. I'm on this high, excited, and now I've just been dropped to a floor that has no bottom. I don't know what to do, but what I do here is apartment, park, and liquor store. Wait a minute. And then she dropped earthquake number 2. She says, I have known all along. You've known what all along? Turns out all this started in 1971 when we first started singing. So this has been going on for at least 6 years. My 3 youngest sisters are 5 and 6 years old. My oldest sister, 71, is around 10, 11. Wait, you've known what? Now, as bad as that is, the shock and disbelief, And PTSD is, I don't even know what PTSD stands for at that time. I've never even heard of the acronym or the words post traumatic stress disorder. I have no idea, but I'm in the throes of it. My three brothers and I are in the throes of it, but not my sisters because they had already been in it. In fact, that's what they were talking about that morning. It's time to tell the boys before we signed with Motown. They need to know. Rob, the void is getting darker and darker. What is going on? My family's breaking apart. And then my oldest sister locks me and my three brothers down for 45 years when she spins around and points a bony finger at us and says to her innocent brothers, you can't talk about it. It didn't happen to you. It only happened to us girls. You can't talk about it ever. And like that, relationships between brothers and sisters that were so tight. I mean, we're 8 years apart. My mother had all eight of us by the time she was 24. Those relationships are on the living room floor, broken, destroyed.
Yeah.
What do brothers do? Because when the betrayal happens, the predator is confronted, the empowerer or empowerers are confronted, and obviously the direct victims, in this case my sisters, are confronted. No one ever asks about the brothers. And so we are left to try to figure out what to do. No one asks, are you okay? Do you need to talk? And this is the question. Why are brothers always left out of the conversation? Because, and I understood what my sister was doing. It took me years later, and I know there's a lot to get to here. But when we are told we can't talk about it, and I've spoken to many women, and I've spoken to many brothers on this, when we are told we can't talk about what we hear is that we don't matter.
Yeah.
Our voices don't matter. What we are feeling is irrelevant. We're going to put you on a shelf in a closet and tuck you away. Do not ever ask us a question. But our healing requires that we speak to you. You're our first people who could help us understand. And without those conversations, brothers are left to wander and wonder and vividly imagine for years what happened to your sisters. And so there's a tremendous amount to this. This is just the tip of the iceberg, but I know we don't have time to get to all of that. So that's what I do.
So tell me,
I elevate the voices of brothers. That's what I do.
Why do you think the family, so it sounds like it was all the family except for the brothers, the parents and the sisters all decided to do this that day before the contract? Did they want to sabotage the contract? Are they, I'm just curious if there was a meaning for that.
Yeah, absolutely, which is a great question. It's a question I'm asked all the time. Yes, there is tremendous meaning in that, particularly for my oldest sister. My oldest sister had had enough. And it made no difference who we were going to sign with, and she was going to end it right then and there. Now, we were solely dependent on our house and our food and our clothing and our car with United Artists Records. Without them, we're homeless again. But my sister, and I get it, she needed it to end for her. She needed to protect her three youngest sisters. That is why she picked that day, because she did not want to go into another contract, particularly with Motown and everything that they had set up for us. They had already created the pilot TV episode, the variety show for us. They were about to pour millions into us. And my oldest sister was very much known. And it took me a while to understand, me and my brothers. But can you imagine how traumatizing that would have been to years later? We are on VH1's Behind the Music, another tragic family story, or MTV. The trauma would never end. It becomes generational.
Yeah.
My sisters would never be able to escape the stigma and all of that. So that's what it was for her. Ultimately, protect her and her sisters. And I get it, because of what men have done historically to women over the beginning of time. has not been great on this topic. And women control the narrative, and I get it, I understand it, and well, there should. But there is a group that doesn't get a chance to speak, that
Yeah.
never gets a chance to get any support or healing or tools to help us cope with it. And that's why I bring voice and bring and put a spotlight on what brothers go through.
The perspective. So did your brothers help you with the writing of the book? No.
No,
I think you
no,
mentioned though that your sisters contributed. Did you tell me that?
yeah. Well, let me backtrack on that answer now that I know where you're going with it. Ultimately, it took 45 years before I could even talk to my sisters about it. In fact, my brothers and I never talked about it because our sister said, "Don't talk about it." And people ask me, "Well, why didn't you talk about it?" Well, here's the thing: I had just lost my family. I had lost everything I thought they were and what we were about. I'm not about to cut the ultimate cord that connects me to my sisters. I am going to do what they said do. Do not do anything. So it took 45 years. And once I started writing the book in 2013, I'm going all the way through it. It took me 10 years to write it because it's so difficult to try to give voices, to get people to understand what brothers go through. And in in a in part of my healing was I had to get to my sister to tell them what I was going to do. And that is another story. But ultimately, I went to them like I did two of my brothers to answer your question. I think the book can be more impactful for a larger audience. Girls, if you are willing to write a piece, contribute to this, write whatever you want to write. Talk about me, talk about what all the woulda, coulda, shoulda all day, but it will give other women and girls an opportunity to see in this setting how families can come together and even write things. I did the same thing with my older full brother. I have 24 brothers and sisters, 16 that are half at least. So my dad, my biological dad was all over the place, but I got my older half brother to also contribute. So you get this perspective of not just from me as a brother and the guilt and the anger, the betrayal and the shame, the stigma and all that, but you also get three sisters and two brothers as well. So you get this full family view of it. And I am incredibly proud that they allowed me to do this, and they will contribute to hopefulness that I'm writing now in my last book, which will be happiness.
Yeah. So how is the family dynamic today? I mean, I'm curious, is mom and stepdad still together? I mean, do you all have, from the whole time of this, revelation, has there been, regular family gatherings? Or I would imagine things changed dramatically from that point on, but I could be wrong.
Well, you are not wrong. You're absolutely correct. And during the course of the 45 years, in the immediate aftermath, two of my sisters, they just left. But we were still bound contractually to United Artists Records, so we had to keep going in some form. And we had a lot of great times together. My mother threw three picnics a year, 4th of July, Labor Day, Memorial Day. And I think, in looking back on it, I think part of that, in part was, let me give my children some happy memories.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
so we did it for years, and we had a lot of great times. So in that, but over those years, we would hear from our sisters in those conversations, be it around Thanksgiving or Christmas. How could you not see my tears? How could you not see me weeping? How come you're not saying anything? Well, you told us not to. Well, we don't know what to do. And so that happened in the immediate aftermath. It took me 45 years to approach my sisters about this. But after I did, it opened up a new line of communication where we were able to start to share our experiences and for my sisters what they expected and where we may have come up short and then they're understanding, oh, that's why you didn't, because we said for you not to. Like, yes, yes. So right now, relationships with three of my sisters are amazing because of the writing of this book. It took me 10 years to write it. My two youngest brothers, they have not been able to come back from it. Some of it's personality, and some of it is just, I am not interested. So those two, unfortunately, are still out there. But my older brother and my older half brother, the relationships are great. My mother, no, there's no relationship there. But I will say this about my mother and me, and all of this is in the book. I leave nothing out.
Hmm.
It's as a child, you want to have connection with your parents if at all possible. You know, it's kind of the Stockholm syndrome kind of thing that goes on, and you know it, and you try to protect yourself from it, but the emotional pull is incredibly great. And so, in trying to create a relationship with my mother shortly after this, you know, you well, certainly what I did. I know we don't have that much time, but she came up short again on some things, and I was put in an awkward situation. So I don't have much conversation with her, and yet uh, two of my sisters, knowing what she did, have gone back and created relationships with her, which I find interesting, which I write about in the book. Because if a brother were to do that, we would be raked over the coals,
Yeah.
you know. But it's just really, really interesting some of the perspectives that I explore uh, in helplessness.
Yeah, no, for sure. So I guess one of the things I'm want to make sure I'm clear on the sisters. I mean, it almost sounds like they felt like you didn't have the right to I don't know what I want to say, grieve, be angry, whatever that emotion would be,
Yeah, yeah,
because you weren't technically the physical victim. So has it gotten to the point where they can they see now, this
yeah,
many years later, okay, that
yeah,
brothers,
yeah. Two of them can. My oldest one, who made the demand or proclamation or command, whatever you want to call it, still has difficulty with it. And yeah, you're absolutely correct. They did not believe we belonged in the grieving space. How could we possibly be grieving? It didn't happen to us. But, and I get that a lot when I'm speaking. There is usually a woman when I'm at an event who will stand up and say, you know, your sisters were absolutely correct. It didn't happen to you boys. You cannot talk about it. And then I tell them this. I say, first of all, it did happen to us. When it happens to one in the family, it happens to everyone. We just didn't know it. But it did happen to us. We were impacted. And said, but here's the other part. 6 years before my sisters were sexually abused in 71, my older brother and I were sexually abused by our babysitter at 65, almost daily for 6 months.
mm,
So I understand that part of it as well. And then they will usually say, oh, you do get it. And like, yeah. And then I think, but I shouldn't have to go there
yeah, yeah,
in order to make you understand that my trauma is real. This is not a conversation that we should be having where my trauma is worse than yours and blah,
right.
blah. You
Yeah,
know, but we do that in order to protect ourselves, in order to make us feel that our grieving is more important than someone else, which is something that we can't do because we're all different and we all take it in different.
yeah. You know what you reminded me of? I had a guest on my show whose brother was killed in 9/11, the attacks on the towers in 9/11, and she commented about how for a long time she didn't feel it was right for other people to grieve that disaster because she had lost
Mm,
someone and they hadn't. And it was like she had to come to that realization of, we all lost something, whatever, maybe not a loved one, we all lost something in there, and it's okay for us to grieve as a whole. It's not a question of who's allowed, who's got what level, who's got whatever the biggest right. So yeah, you're reminding me of that conversation quite a bit with what you're saying here.
yeah. Part of the challenge for brothers, and I'm asking, so what is one of the, what's the biggest challenge for brothers? Because why should you even be allowed in the conversation? And I will tell people this is the biggest challenge for brothers. We are told we are not invited to the conversation, but we are expected to answer for our non participation. That is a paradox that should not exist, but it does. How can you be told you can't participate, but you must answer for your lack of participation? We've got to get past that. And yet, as I said, I understand why my sisters and sisters that I've spoken to, and I've spoken to hundreds, and I've spoken to hundreds of brothers. And once they begin to look at it from my perspective, it's usually a light bulb goes off. I never thought of that. And I never even considered that my brother would be in pain. And I said, yes, we are. We don't know first of all, how to deal with our own pain because we've got fear and anxiety and confusion and crisis and depression and isolation, all of this. And our protective instincts are kicking in and we want to do something. My definition of a brother who has sisters, the definition of a brother is you're there to protect the honor of your sister.
Yeah.
And yet I've been told I can't, and which means what happens? My self-esteem takes a hit. My self-worth takes a hit. The psychological and emotional impact is devastating. And we're trying to regulate our emotions in the process, try to contain our anger, try to contain our fear, our depression, our guilt, because understand we feel very guilty. We feel a lot of self-blame. So, Christine, how do we get to a place where we can bring brothers into a conversation where we are viewed as taboo, or at the very least, an inconvenient truth? Because there's already enough conversation around child sexual abuse. Why do we even need to deal with brothers? How do we get there? How do we create tools and systems that bring brothers? I got to say, I've been looking so forward to this conversation and looking at your background and who you are, from trauma and healing and leadership and all of this stuff. I said, okay, I cannot wait to talk to her because I've spoken to so many family therapists who told me, you know what? I cannot help you because you're a brother. And I'm like, wait, what does that have to do with it? Well, I don't know how to handle a brother's trauma in this situation. If you were your sisters, I could help you. But what about me? How do I get to a point where I can find a way forward and find the courage necessary to talk to my sisters? And no one has ever been able to give me an answer. They just tell me, I can't deal with this. I don't know. You need to go find someone else who can handle a brother's trauma. I have spoken to so many, but there's no one out there.
Yeah. Because I would imagine my first thought is if I was the brother, I would be thinking, well, how did I not see this? How did I not know what was happening? And
oh my gosh, yes.
I guess I want to call that survivor's guilt, I guess is what I want to say about that. That kind of how did I not know this is going on under my roof? I mean, mom knew about it. How did I miss it? I mean, to me, I would think hearing your story, that would be my biggest, I don't know, pain would be.
Well, you could ask just about any woman who has been sexually abused, how is it no one sees what's going on? The design of the abuse itself by the predators and those who empower them is such that if you talk, if you say anything, the threat of retaliation is what locks you in place, is what locked my sisters in place, because they were constantly being told, if you talk to your brothers, I'm going to hurt you, I'm going to hurt them. And so they don't. Victims do not. And then you throw on top of that the social stigma that comes with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
The lack of belief by everyone else. Oh, this didn't happen. You misunderstood. Oh, you got it all wrong.
Yeah.
It happens all the time, be it with law enforcement, be it with clergy, be it with not so much with psychologists, because they will listen. But for those people on the outside, and your friends are going to tell you, okay, I believe you, but why didn't you do something? Girl, if that had happened to me, I'd have done this.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
dude, if I would have done this, and as someone who has experienced trauma, just the both of us here, we know that's noise.
Mm-hmm.
We know that's not helpful. And so how do you get to help? I'm asked about, why is your book called The Emotional Health Challenges and not the Mental Health Challenges? I say it's a good reason. I initially started out with the mental health challenge until I understood what the problem was with that. I think most trauma is emotional in nature. We feel it emotionally first. It's overwhelming first. Mental, to me, becomes a thing that's more creation logical,
Mm.
because you're alone and you're in isolation. And when you go see a therapist or someone like that, or you are directed to go see a therapist, let me put it that way, go see a therapist, go see family counseling. The people around you telling you that are telling you, you're alone. I want nothing to do with you. That's your problem. It's not my problem. You go figure that out. But the emotional part is what came first, the feelings of it. Because emotional for me means it's a shared experience that you want to share with someone. You need to talk. It becomes community, it becomes empowering. But when you cannot get the emotional help, where do you go next? Mental. You go in your head. You're alone. You start to figure things out logically. I got to do this. I got to do that. I got to take this person out, which is exactly what happened to me 9 years later when I went to a very dark place of almost killing my stepfather, because I could not get the emotional support. We talked to aunts, we talked to uncles, we talked to different people. I could go into a bookstore and find an article from a woman, written by a woman, for a woman. There would be a movie of the week. There'd be a documentary. Dr. Phil would have someone on at that time, maybe someone before him. And we still have the same thing today. We would have Oprah on, and she'll be talking to the victim, or, even though it's starting to get men finally coming out about their direct sexual abuse,
Right.
there's still nothing that addresses the brothers. And when you cannot do that, as I said, I went mental. I almost killed him. There are systems and tools that, in my opinion, need to address the needs of brothers. And so, as I said, I could not wait to talk to you and get your perspective on it. How do we create things that deal with the needs of brothers in this situation?
Yeah, no, I love the thought behind the book, and I look forward to reading it because I plan to. Tell me about the next one you've got coming out and what the topic is and where you're going with that.
The next one, as I said, the 3-book series, from helplessness to hopefulness to happiness. The next one's about hopefulness. How do you go from helplessness to hopefulness in this situation? Because for me, the most powerful 4-letter word is not love. It's hope. Hope. Love already predisposes that there's a possibility for the hope of it, that it's even possible. Without hope, you can't even get to the thought that you can even achieve the idea of a loving relationship.
Right.
So we've got to go with hope first. And one of the things people will tell me, well, but it can't be hope. And I say, well, wait a minute. When someone's taking something from you, what do they look to take from you first? Hope. Hope for a better life, hope for a better you, hope for a better this. They don't take love. They don't target that. So hopefulness looks at, how did I go from this helplessness to a hopeful situation of people, places, and things that kept me tethered. My 3 sisters are contributing to hopefulness as well,
Oh, I love
to
that.
learn what they went through, and my 2 brothers as well. So you're going to get that part of it from their perspective. In the last book, Happiness, how we got to where we are today, where we are constantly playing and having fun with each other, when I thought that was impossible for 4 decades. I never even thought it was possible,
Yeah.
but here we are today.
Yeah, no, I love these books. Sound like they're going to be amazing contribution, if you will, to people who have sat in the same box or are sitting there. So My next question has to do on those lines. What would you say? We have a listener who's perhaps a brother that's gone through
Yeah.
something like you've gone through. What's out there for them? How do they get to where you are without having to have 45 years pass?
Well, there's really that I've been able to find anything that addresses the needs of brothers. Mine is the very first conversation specifically targeted at brothers. And I would say this, one of the things I wish I had done earlier, there's a book by Dr. Susan Jeffers called Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. I think it was written in 1995. I had to get there. I knew that I was going to have to talk to my sisters if I was going to get any sense of control of who I was and become the brother that they always expected. So I had to feel the fear of being afraid to talk to them and do it anyway. It's so much easier said than done. It really is. But before I could even do that, I had to understand that I'm a victim.
Hmm.
I did not recognize I was a victim until 7 years ago. Even with my babysitter, I didn't even, there was just no way. I'm like, no, no, I'm a strong black man. No, I can do this. Society says, and our community says, no, we don't give up any of that stuff. I'm like, oh, it is so toxic.
Hmm.
This toxic masculinity, especially within the black community, it is so incredibly damaging. But once my wife pointed out to me, you're a victim, and I just pushed back. Christine, I said, there's just no way. She said, look at you. You can't even talk about this stuff without crying and shaking. So I had to admit that I was a victim. That's job one. You got to get there first. You have to embrace it because it is part of you. It's a part of your DNA. It's not going anywhere.
Yeah.
And once you're in a dark room, you're in a car and a song comes on and the tears starts rolling, you have not dealt with it. The way that I found to deal with it was to find at least one person, and it was my second sister, who I could talk to about it. That person who would not judge, who would not push back, who would just listen and not give me any feedback noise.
Right.
That's what she did. She embraced me. She said, it's okay. Not only is it okay, but you should write your book. After all this time, that's what I wish I had done first. I wish I hadn't wasted 45 years. I
Yeah.
wish I had gone through what I needed to go through. As they say, you need to go through to get through.
Yep. Yep. It's a vulnerable place, though. I mean, I totally get that, especially
Oh, it is.
strong people. I mean, I have a very hard time when I use the word victim because I'm thinking, no, 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 no. I'm way too strong. I'm way too this for that. But yeah, I had to get there because it's like if you don't, there's no moving forward from that point on. You have to recognize it. So
Yeah.
that's incredibly good advice to get there. Um, so we are going to link to your book when we put the podcast notes out. Is there anything else so you'd like to share with our listeners before we go?
Yeah, I would share this. Understand that what I'm talking about crosses race, religion, politics, gender, age, social, economic, wealth. It crosses all these lines. And nothing became more clear to me than when my father-in-law called me to tell me he wants to talk to me about something. He's 95 years old. He's white and he's Jewish.
A little different.
And he calls me to his house and he says, I want to talk to you about your book. Okay, Dad, I'm black. I'm from the West Coast. He's from the East Coast. He's come from a stable, upper class, middle class neighborhood. I'm very poor, as you know. And he said, I want to talk to you about your book. And I said, okay. And I'm thinking, oh, what does he want to talk about? But I said, all right, Dad. He says, I want you to know I understand. You understand what? Keep in mind, he's 95 years old. When I was a little boy, we lived in an apartment in New York. I was sent upstairs to get something from our close friends who we always kept the doors open. Our families were that close. When I walked in, I saw him molesting my oldest sister. I went back downstairs. I didn't say a word. I didn't know what to do. And my sister did not say a word. It happened again 2 months later. And he says to me, as tears, he's 95 years old at this time. This happened when he was 16 or 17. I want you to know I understand. And it hit me then. He's carrying this burden and he wants someone to know.
Yeah.
He wants someone to say, it's okay. He wants someone to finally hear him because what he said was, I never told anyone but your mother in law this story for almost 80 years.
Yeah.
I am carrying this. He passes away 3 years later. And I'm like, oh my goodness. He could have spoken to his white Jewish son in law. He could have spoken to his white Catholic son in law. But here he is talking to his black son in law because we have this connection
Yes. So it's
of
a connection.
brothers, the brothers who both have been hiding this, who have
Yeah.
been carrying this. So understand that this is not just a black thing where a lot of people come at me. You wrote brothers. No, it's not brothers.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not that. It's brothers. It crosses everything. And if you're a sister, this is an opportunity possibly for you to just take a step back and say, wow, maybe I need to talk to so and so. Maybe he has something he'd like to share, or maybe I have something I'd really like to share with him because it could bring us closer together and answer some questions for the two of us.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure. Well, thank you so much for your time today. I have thoroughly enjoyed our conversation and look forward to reading your books.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Good Grief. We hope that stories shared today have inspired and empowered you on your own journey of resilience. If you want to dive deeper into the themes of trauma, tragedy, and survival, be sure to check out my memoir, The Day I Became the Spider Killer, a memoir of trauma, tragedy, and survival. In this book, I shared my own raw and honest experiences, offering insights and strategies for overcoming life's toughest challenges. You can purchase the book on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or listen to it on Audible. Your support helps us continue to bring these powerful stories to light and spread a message of hope and resilience. Stay tuned for more incredible stories on our next episode. Until then, remember, even in the face of life's toughest trials, there can be light, growth, and good grief.